Hey guys, it's Rich on Touch Loops here, and this is the follow-up episode to the Arca production series that was run by Stu a few weeks ago. So I've been handed the session from Stu with the loops in and also all the work that he's done. So I thought I'd show you how I go about mixing this to get it to where I'm happy and also release quality. As an overview, I'm using Ableton, the same as Stu. And what I've done is I've gone through each track and basically flattened them so I can work with audio because I prefer doing it that way rather than having MIDI available on screen. A quick way of doing that, if you're not aware, is you can right click on each channel, freeze track, and then once it's frozen, click flatten, and it basically spits out an audio file. The way that I've got this session laid out at the moment, I basically have my master set up in this way, which might seem a little over the top, but this is kind of how I like to work. So as a quick little sneak, always have a EQ on the master with a high pass filter. Really like the Pro Q2 just because the low latency modes, and also it feels like the phasing that happens around the sub is pretty clean. So that's my go-to at the moment, no EQ being done. From that, I'm going into Slate Virtual Tape Machine. Just big fan of that whole analog sound, and I've always really been into the bottom end of what this thing does. It seems to have a really nice bottom end and does amazing things to the subs, as well as softening transients in the top, so it's pretty useful on your master. Next door, I have this little number, which is an SSL clone. I'm being quite open with my attack, which means transients are being let through, but I have quite a quick release time, As soon as the compressors let the first transient through, it's clamping down on everything else, but it's quick enough that you can barely feel it pumping. And that's kind of how I have it set up. When we go through the session, I'll show you what it's doing, but at the most, I'm taking off 2 dB at 2:1 ratio. Then I go into this Mag EQ, which a lot of people might not have seen before, but it's got this incredible 40K band here, which might seem a little bit weird, but the filters that run at 40K actually come down into around 17, 18K. So you can actually hear it being used without actually getting any sibilance or kind of clicking those top of cymbals and things of this sort. And then finally into that, I'm just going into the Pro limiter, which I'd take off if I was sending it to mastering. But for this, I want it to feel finished. So in terms of drums, what was sent over was great. It sounded absolutely mega, but I personally like to divide things down into kick and snare. It's just how I've always worked, which means I'm able to do better compression and also to affect things in the way I want. There was a bit of top end I felt was needed in the kick and not particularly in the snare. So I obviously divided it down. So if we have a look at what I'm doing on the kick channel, we've got a virtual channel on there, which is basically recreating the sound of a desk. It's a Brit 4K model, which I'm guessing is SSL. Then going into an API style EQ, which is adding some top end at 15K and taking out some 400, which can be a little bit lumpy. So here's both examples for you, without the EQ and with. Pretty subtle, but I like what it's doing. I'm also adding a ton of 2.5K here. I'm adding 9 decibels, which is obviously giving us that brightness we want. Without and with. Then we go on the end to my compression chain. My first one I've got set up here is doing something quite similar to what's on the master. Really slow attack, really fast release, just to kind of add a little bit more body to the sound. And then finally, a distressor that I'm running in parallel. So here you can see the mix is down and each one's taking off dB in a bit, whereas this one in parallel is obviously slamming things at 9 or 10, but obviously it's in parallel, so it's not too much of an issue. Next snare. Similar kind of vibe, same setup, just obviously different EQ moves. Virtual channel again, I like that cohesion between the two of them. I've also got a big boost at 15K. I'm adding a fair whack. Again, taking out some 400 because it's a bit of a frequency I don't particularly like. And then we've got a 4K boost as well. So we can go before and after. And with. little bit of sizzle, which I'm quite into. Then if we check this top end EQ, I've just made a single cut and it looks like it's at around 5k, 5 and a bit. Just felt like there was something in there which was bugging me. It was a little bit sharp, so I can see with it. Yeah, pretty nasty. So obviously, cut that out and just clean the whole thing up. Hats. Not a huge amount of work, just a little bit EQ. You find with the hats, especially with these trap ones, you get quite a lot of bottom end in them, which is just unnecessary. Obviously, if we have too much bass, it's going to be triggering our limiter. Tiny roll off, and again, around that 400 hertz kind of frequency, you're just going to get a lot of mud, a lot of boxiness, so it's just good to pull it out and really clean up your mix. Percussion. Absolutely nothing. Thought it sounded great on its own. All I'm doing is sending to my effects. So if we check out those, I've got this on Send C, which is the space echo. But what I'm doing is I'm literally just using it as a reverb because I like the spring in it. So we can hear before and after. Quite cool, quite roomy. With. A little bit more 3D. Love the sound of the spring, kind of really into that vintage sound. It seems to fit the track quite nicely. Grainy percussion. Same again, a little bit of a duck around the 400. It just seems to be, it could have been the reverb that was used, or it could just be the samples. Seem to have a little bit of junk that I'm not really a huge fan of, so we'll listen to it. All this stuff just seems to get in the way. High passing again, nothing too aggressive, but we're just rolling off all those subs which we just don't need. Play them together. Then on this granular one, I also found that the frequencies were a little bit hectic and it was getting in the way of the pads, so I've set up a sidechain. But the good thing about separating the kicks out earlier means that I can obviously have some quite nice control over my sidechain compressor. So we can see it in action here. Every time the kick plays, get a little bit of reduction just to get some clarity on that bottom end. Moving on to the bass. Same again. Sidechain from the kick. Obviously an 808 and a kick playing at the same time can be a little bit overkill. So I like to duck it out a little bit. Nothing huge, but it's taken off a wee bit, probably 3 dB. Virtual tape machine, again, really impressive little beast, just for adding that extra bottom end. And as we start to get above 0 VU, you're starting to get a little bit of compression as well. Tiny bit of saturation as well, which is quite cool. Help those 808s cut through on speakers. Simple stuff though. A lot of this mixing, it feels like, is just about getting the right levels, to be honest. As you can see, we've gone to the ARPs, absolutely nothing. Was really happy with those. Lead line, same again, absolutely nothing. But what I've done is I've had a little bit of delay to these. So cool tone, a little bit flat maybe, a little bit one-dimensional. I've gone and used Ableton's stock delay, but there's this preset called Analog Collapse, which I really like. It has quite a high input level, so you need to be wary of that one. But it just seems to push things quite aggressively and has that traditional bucket delay, which I'm really into. So we can check it out. Cool filtering just to get rid of the tops, which I don't want to see, and then a little bit of the spring reverb as well, which is quite a nice touch. It's also being sent to the spring, this one, just to add that little bit of vintage thing. Then our choirs at the end. Super simple, just thought it'd be quite nice to duck these out a tiny bit with some sidechain, just because they're quite a dominant sound. And that's pretty much it. It was quite a simple one, but together we can hear the whole thing. Cool, let's check in on our master to see what that's doing. Nothing too hectic, just going above 0 VU, which is quite useful for adding a little bit of compression. SSL style compressor. Again, taking off the dB, nothing too hectic, but it's quite nice. And then the Maggie Q, it'd be worth showing you how this works. So without, it just gives you a tiny bit of that air, which I think is really useful for a mixer. If I boost it, pretty amazing. And then our limiter. Literally just catching the odd snare, so nothing too hectic. So yeah, there you go, guys. Quite a simple one, but hopefully it showed a few techniques which I use, and also the way of dealing with loops to make them work together, because sometimes clashing frequencies and sidechaining can be tricky, but hopefully that helped. Cheers.